And today, Rachel Reeves is at the International Monetary Fund, blaming Brexit for dragging down the British economy.
Now, in remarks during an International Monetary Fund committee, she told leading financial figures that the UK's productive challenge has worsened since leaving the EU.
Well, it was the Chancellor's biggest warning about the costs, in her view, of Brexit, and a potential signal that tough calls were coming in next month's budget, where, of course, we're all expecting those dreaded tax rises.
Right, well, let's go to Westminster, where GB News' political editor Christopher Hope joins us now to tell us more. Christopher, what can you tell us?
Well, the theme here, isn't it, Tom and Nana? It goes back to the Labour conference when we heard Nigel Farage being blamed for the small boats crisis. The boats were called Farage boats by Sir Keir Starmer, and that's because Farage, of course, campaigned for Brexit before 2016 and then, in Labour's eyes, left the field of play, despite the fact he thought it was being delivered, of course, by the Tory party. And now we see the economic travails in this country being blamed on Brexit. Firstly, over the weekend by Andrew Bailey. He's the Bank of England governor. He has said that Brexit for the foreseeable will be a negative drag on the economy. He says he blames it in part for the falling in forecast growth of the economy from 2.5% to 1.5%. He blames for that lower productivity, the ageing population and trade restrictions. And now Rachel Reeves has piled in. She's the Chancellor, of course. She's had 4 days in Washington at the IMF annual meeting. She says the UK's productivity challenge has been compounded by the way in which the UK left the European Union. This is deeply frustrating, I think, to people who think that Brexit is being blamed here as an excuse for government failure to get the economy going. A more interesting debate might be whether increasing taxes on employers, and both through the national insurance increase last year and also through increasing the amount paid in minimum wage, that could have a bearing on the jobs crisis in this country. And also, we saw last week on Martin Daubney's show, he calculated, I think rightly, that we have saved £88 billion in not giving money to the European Union, having left that club. We're not being held to that. Some of those economies which are failing, France, for example, is in a much worse state than ours. And this analysis fails to talk about, I think, the benefits of the trade deals we've done with the European Union, the USA and India, none of which, of course, well, certainly not with the EU, but the other two also wouldn't have happened had we been part of the European Union. So I think this is a trend, though, going into the budget and out of that the Labour Party will start taking aim at Brexit and saying it's made us all poorer.
I suppose one of the big issues here is that wasn't all of this true a year ago? If the Chancellor wanted to make a big song and dance about how the UK economy was doing worse because of Brexit, why wouldn't she have done it a year ago? Doesn't it all look a bit like she's clutching at straws now to try and find excuses?
Yeah, that's right, Tom. I wonder why our ministers aren't more open about why we are where we are. We spent £500 billion in a 3-year period on the COVID pandemic response and then dealing with the energy shock caused by the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. £500 billion we weren't meant to be spending. And I remember vividly that of course, happened shortly after we left the European Union. So to blame Brexit for that cause, when in fact all countries are indebted by paying people not to work for long periods during the COVID pandemic and the like, that's surely the honest chat to have about this issue rather than blaming Brexit. But of course, Brexit does unite many on the left against the right, so maybe that's part of it.
All right, Christopher Hope, thank you very much. Good to talk to you.
Have you had a random call lately from a strange number, maybe trying to sell you something or even scam you? If so, your info could be out there. That's because of data brokers, shady companies that scrape the internet for your personal details and sell them to marketers or even scammers. These days, scammers can even use AI to mimic your friends' voices and trick you into sending money. It's not just annoying, data brokers often target vulnerable people with high-interest loans or sketchy offers. But there is a solution. Incogni, the sponsor of this video. Incogni contacts data brokers on your behalf and requests your info be deleted from their databases. And because your data can keep popping up, Incogni keeps sending removal requests to make sure it stays gone. They've just launched a new unlimited plan with custom removals. If you find your info on a weird website, just send them the link and their privacy team will work to get it taken down. Getting started is easy. Hit the link in the description, create your account and let Incogni handle the rest. It's risk-free for 30 days and you'll get 60% off an annual plan with the code GBNews. Take back control of your data with Incogni.
Well, let's get some of the more of the details here with the Labour councillor Stuart Fawcett. Stuart, thanks for being here with us. I suppose it's quite difficult for Rachel Reeves to sort of put this argument across because she did say last year that that would be her one and only tax-raising budget.
Yeah, I think we're in an interesting fiscal position here, but I think we've got some clarity for the future and actually a point of aspiration for the future as well, now that the UK is not in the European Union. You talked there about the integrity on the tax-raising measures that the Chancellor committed to last year. And I think it's good to be clear why those are, which is, and I know GB News probably won't want me to talk too much about the past, and we definitely want to talk about the future. But let's look at what happens if we don't stick to rules like that. You're talking about tax raises. There's another tax raise which really concerns me in people's pockets every day, which is inflation and the effect on them.
And we've got the highest inflation in the G7 at the moment.
Which is really concerning, and we need to continue the work on that. And the basis of that is strong fiscal responsibility, which the Chancellor is determined to show. So what we don't want to do is to see people's goods going up, their shopping, their everyday spending, and of course their mortgage payments, which we saw if we blow the fiscal rules out the water and make unbudgeted for tax cuts with more public sector borrowing.
Sure, but you're talking about the end of a process here. I mean, had there been some semblance of economic growth over the last 12 months, we wouldn't need to be looking at spending cuts or tax rises to fulfil the fiscal rules. Indeed, what the Chancellor implied last year was she fixed the foundations so that there wouldn't need to be these massive spending cuts or tax rises, so that there would be growth in the economy and the fiscal rules would be met without painful decisions. She's failed in that task.
I would disagree with that. I think we're still in the early stages of this plan and the strategy that's coming forward now. So when you're talking about so I think this is a plan now where we're looking at a brand new economy. As the Chancellor has mentioned today in America, the UK has now obviously left the European Union. Now, I actually think that has a great opportunity for the UK on the worldwide stage. However, we need a better deal with the European Union to enable that to happen. So we're talking about business movement, so things like red tape at customs, the flow of goods and services. Now, the Governor of the Bank of England recently commented, which I think probably the Chancellor has mentioned in her comments in America, about the downturn in growth that's because of Brexit and the 4% downturn that could be attributed to that. Now, I think actually Brexit has some great opportunities for the British economy, more on the worldwide scale. But in the immediate term, what we need to do is get more investment into the UK to become a greater trader on the world stage. So I think the growth agenda there needs to be fueled by incentives that are going to enable that to happen, whilst also protecting people's spending power in their own pockets.
But didn't she have, I mean, you say this, but they had a reset, didn't they, with the EU, which they should have laid all of this out, which I don't understand what went wrong there. They've reset it, they've reset the relationship. Are you saying they're going to have another reset with the EU? And also, we're talking about growth. In 2019, she made a speech in the Houses of Commons which explained why you should never raise national insurance on employers or employees because it's a growth tax. Yet she has done exactly that. Why can't she own the problem that has created, which means no growth, employers not employing people, which means her tax take is smaller, which means the economy is less productive?
I'm pleased you put that one forward because I think it comes back to the consensus we have on the British economy and the way we spend money, which mirrors that of a household budget or even a business's budget. So if a business turns over, so all the money they take over the counter, £1 billion a year, currently we're 97% of GDP. So we're nearly £1 billion in debt in order to do that as a country, if we were to mirror that. So if that was a household, if your household income was £30,000, you have £30,000 worth of debt in order to make that happen. That is not a sustainable way of doing it. Now, what are your choices? To cut what you're spending, what's going out, or do you increase that ceiling by making more growth and making that more productive?
It's their own fault, isn't it? Because they came up with the rules, no raising of income tax, no raising of VAT, and no raising of national insurance. insurance. So if she had more freedom and flexibility to perhaps raise income tax, then that would have been wiser. These are all things that she put in place. So this is her fault. So how she has the audacity to start blaming Brexit when we can all clearly see that the fact that inflation has risen is really down to, a lot of it down to the policies that they've put forward. I find it just shocking that she then thinks it's wise, whilst in America, to then blame Brexit.
You know, I don't think the Chancellor is actually in America at the moment talking down Britain at all. I think the talking point is very clear, which are trade talks. We want to be more Atlantic facing. We want to do greater trade on the world stage. An issue that we are having at the minute as a country is the deal we have with the European Union and the practice that enables businesses to have access to that market. Because access is a basis of growth. So now, because of the fact we are out of the EU, President Trump has actually enabled us to have much lower tariffs than the European Union.
Irony. The irony is, because of Brexit, she's there, and we've got a better trade deal.
Of course, and I'm not arguing the fact that having left the European Union, as someone who voted for Brexit, we're seeing some benefits of that. Of course, there's other benefits that we're not seeing at the minute, which people want to see in terms of the free movement of people. So, on a fiscal level, just to come back to your point about inflation, the other option is to pump more money into the economy, make borrowing commitments for everyday spending. And the last time we did that was at Liz Truss's budget. People's mortgages went through the roof, and that is at the point when inflation went absolutely through the ceiling. And we have to avoid that. And it's that fiscal responsibility that I think is a core principle, and why we need to look at all these other options. And that only other option is growth.
Exactly.
And to do that, we need more access to worldwide economies.
That's right. Growth is the answer. So national insurance tax on employers is madness.
I think we were in a really difficult spot last year when we did that. What I can look at is that the integrity of what the Chancellor said and what she kept to on those three particular commitments.
OK, well, thank you very much indeed, Stuart Fawcett, Labour councillor, for talking through, let's hope it won't be, but many people suspect it to be, a budget of doom.